Mrs. Herrmann is standing in the dining room with a phone pressed to her ear when a sharp pop cuts through the house. She stops talking. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from somewhere close, somewhere inside the rooms around her. Jimmy is near her in the dining room. Her daughter is back in the bedroom. For a moment, Mrs. Herrmann stays where she is, listening for another sound, waiting for the house to explain itself. Nothing comes. She lowers the phone and turns toward the living room. That's when she sees it. An ink bottle that had been sitting on the dining room table is no longer there. It's in the living room now, with ink splashed across a chair, the floor, and the wallpaper. Mrs. Herrmann steps closer, but the closer she gets, the less sense it makes. The top is off. Ink is still spreading. The room looks like something has just happened in it, but no one is there. She turns back to the phone. Detective Joseph Tozzi, the Nassau County officer who had been looking into the disturbances, had just recently left her house. Mrs. Herrmann ends the call she's on and calls him. Then she gets both children into the hallway. They wait there together, away from the living room. No one talks. Mrs. Herrmann keeps the children close and watches the doorway, because now the quiet feels less like quiet and more like waiting. Then another crash comes from the living room. This time, she doesn't pause as long. She turns and moves back down the hallway with the children behind her. As the living room comes back into view, she sees the ink first, still splashed across the chair, the floor, and the wallpaper. Then she sees something new. A male figurine shattered near the living room desk. And the only thing missing is the person who could have done it. The ink bottle and the broken figurine are two of the moments people still come back to. They show the problem that followed the Herrmann family through their Long Island home in 1958. Ordinary objects that seem to move, open, spill, or break when no one was supposed to be near them. Police would eventually come to the house. Reporters would walk through the rooms. And investigators would try to sort through what could be explained and what kept slipping out of reach. But before all of that, it started with something small enough to dismiss and kept going until a family had to call the police on their own home. I'm your host, Robert Barber. Tonight, we look at a Long Island poltergeist case where a suburban home became the center of popping bottles, moving objects, police visits, reporters, and one question that never fully settled. This is the story of the Seaford incident, the house where ordinary objects moved when no one was supposed to be touching them. And this is State of the Unknown. In February of 1958, James and Lucille Herrmann lived with their two children at 1648 Redwood Path in Seaford, Long Island. Their daughter was also named Lucille. Their son was James Jr., though most accounts refer to him as Jimmy. He was 12 years old. The Herrmanns lived in a ranch-style house where every room had a purpose and every object had a place. Bottles sat on shelves. Figurines sat on tables. A child's dresser held the things a child cared about. On February 3rd, that ordinary arrangement started to feel unreliable. According to the reported account, Jimmy came home from school and went into his room. On his dresser, a ceramic doll and a model ship were broken. In the version most often told, it looked as though the doll had somehow crashed into the ship. At first, that could have passed for an accident in a child's room. Something fell. Something was bumped. Someone forgot what they'd touched. But the broken objects in Jimmy's room were only the beginning of the day. Mrs. Herrmann reportedly found a small holy water bottle on her dresser lying on its side. The cap was off and the contents had spilled. It was a small thing, but it was the kind of small thing that makes someone stop and look twice. A bottle that should have been closed wasn't closed anymore. Soon, other bottles were involved. The early reports involved the kind of bottles people keep all over the house: bleach in a utility area, shampoo or medicine in a bathroom, holy water in a bedroom. Different rooms, different bottles, but the same basic problem. They were ordinary objects until they started becoming the things everyone had to watch. One early report involved a half-gallon bottle of bleach. According to the story, it had been sitting in a cardboard box on a shelf before it smashed to the floor several feet in front of Mrs. Herrmann and Jimmy. A spill could be cleaned up. A broken bottle made people step back. It put liquid on the floor, sent sound through the room, and gave everyone nearby one place to stare. James Herrmann looked for ordinary explanations. If caps were coming off bottles, maybe the answer involved pressure. Maybe it was humidity. Maybe the contents were reacting somehow. With the first events centered on bottles, those were the explanations closest at hand. But the reports didn't stay attached to one bottle, one room, one product, or one shelf. The incidents kept moving through the house. The Herrmanns didn't begin with a fully formed haunting story. They began with a series of small physical problems that refused to stay small. A cap was off, a bottle had spilled, a container had broken, an object wasn't where it should have been. And once the family started watching the house gave them plenty to watch. Several days after the first incidents, the same kind of activity reportedly came back. More bottles opened or spilled, including ordinary things from the bathroom, kitchen, and utility areas. Again, these were ordinary objects. The reports centered on caps, spills, and items that seemed to change when no one admitted touching them. After that second round, the family had more to check. They could look at the bottles before leaving a room, then look again when they came back. They could ask who'd been nearby. They could remember whether a cap had been tight. And they could look at people in the house. For James Herrmann, that meant looking at Jimmy. It's a hard part of the story, but it's also one of the most human parts. Jimmy was 12 years old. The activities seemed to happen around the family, and in those early days, the objects were small enough that a child could be suspected of causing some of it. From James Herrmann's point of view, a prank or a hidden trick may have been easier to accept than the alternative. According to the reported account, he confronted Jimmy. Then came the bathroom incident. Jimmy was brushing his teeth, and James Herrmann was watching him. James wasn't hearing about it afterward, and he wasn't walking in after something had already happened. He was standing there with the son he suspected. According to James Herrmann's later statement, 2 bottles on the bathroom vanity moved at the same time. One moved forward and fell into the sink. The other spun to the right and crashed on the floor. If you're standing there as the father, that moment changes the suspicion in the room. Jimmy was visible. His hands and body were being watched. And while his father was watching him, the kind of thing Jimmy was suspected of doing reportedly happened anyway. Mrs. Herrmann called police on February 9th. Patrolman J. Hughes came to the house. Once he stepped inside, the case had an outside witness who wasn't family. He wasn't there to bless the house or explain poltergeists. He was a police officer responding to a call from a family who said objects in their home were moving and spilling. While Hughes was reportedly in the living room with the family, noises came from the bathroom. Hughes and the family went to check, and a bottle was found lying on its side. Hughes later said he didn't believe the bottle had been that way when he first looked in the room, though he also left room for the possibility that someone might have turned it over after he saw it. So the scene held two things at once: a police officer in the house and a bottle found changed after a noise from another room. The Herrmanns kept calling because the incidents kept coming. By February 11th, Detective Joseph Tozzi of the Nassau County Police was involved and assigned to the case full-time. Police attention turned the home into a place where positions, times, rooms, statements, and objects had to be recorded. The Herrmann family was now living with two pressures at once. Something in the house seemed to be happening around them, and people outside the family were beginning to ask what each person had seen, heard, touched, and possibly done. The bottles had started the problem, but the questions made it heavier. For a while, the Herrmanns were watching bottles. Caps came off, liquid spilled, containers were found open. The family could point to shelves, sinks, vanities, and tables and say where something had been before it changed. Soon, it wasn't only bottles. Figurines started moving or breaking, and heavier household objects entered the reports too. A lamp, a dresser, and even a bookcase. That shifted the feeling inside the house. A bottle cap could send James Herrmann toward pressure or humidity as an explanation. A figurine moving across open space didn't fit as neatly with that first idea. The family also reported rumbling noises. Lucille Herrmann reportedly described one sound as if the walls were caving in. A pop sent people looking for a bottle, but a rumble made them listen to the house itself. On February 15th, the cousin, Marie Martha, was reportedly at the house. She was sitting in the living room with the two children when a figurine began to move. According to the account given to Detective Tozzi, the figurine seemed to wiggle, then flew about 2 feet toward the television set and landed just short of it. Marie reportedly said neither she nor the children were close enough to touch it. Now a visiting relative was describing movement in the room with her. The family's behavior changed too. The Herrmanns reportedly left the house on several occasions and stayed with friends or relatives for a total of several nights. That meant packing up, leaving their rooms behind and sleeping somewhere else while their own home sat waiting. It meant explaining the situation to other people. It meant stepping away from the house and then having to come back to it. And when they came back, the same objects were still there. The same bathroom, the same living room, the same shelves and tables and bottles. But the objects had a history now. Every cap, every figurine, every sound from the next room could pull the family back into the same question: who touched it? And if no one touched it, what did? By the middle of February, the Herrmanns had moved from confusion to suspicion to police involvement. The reports had moved from bottles to larger household objects. A visiting relative had described seeing a figurine move. The family had spent several nights away from home. On February 20th, Mrs. Herrmann was back inside the house, standing in the dining room with the phone in her hand. The February 20th incident became one of the clearest examples of what made the Herrmann house so difficult to explain. By then, Detective Joseph Tozzi had already been involved, and Mrs. Herrmann knew to call him when something happened. So when the ink bottle left the dining room table and landed in the living room, she didn't treat it like a random spill. She called the detective who had only recently left the house. Then, according to the account, she moved both children into the hallway. That's the part that makes the next crash harder to brush aside inside the story. Mrs. Herrmann and both children were away from the living room when the sound came. When they went back, the male figurine was broken near the living room desk. The room was empty. After that, more people came through the Herrmann house. Reporters entered the same rooms where the family had been living through the disturbances. Newsday reporter Dave Kahn reportedly stayed overnight and heard or witnessed multiple incidents. He reportedly heard a dresser fall over. He also heard a lamp overturn in Mrs. Herrmann's room, a sound reportedly heard by an investigator and a police sergeant as well. The house was still a family home, but now outsiders were sleeping there, listening there, watching for movement, and waiting for the next crash. A living room with a reporter in it didn't feel like the same living room where a family watched television. A hallway being watched for evidence wasn't just a hallway anymore. Other journalists visited too, including people connected to Newsday, Time, the New York Times, and the London Evening News. John Gold of the London Evening News reportedly visited on March 4th and saw or heard incidents while family members were in different rooms. Then the attention started coming from outside the house too. Phones rang, letters arrived. Strangers told the Herrmanns what they thought was happening. Some said ghosts, some said spirits, some said beings from space. Others accused the family of trying to profit from the attention, and some reportedly offered to buy the house for almost nothing. People who had never stepped into the hallway or stood in the bathroom were now sending theories into the Herrmann home. A nickname followed the phenomenon involving the bottle caps, Popper the Poltergeist. It's a catchy name, and that's probably why it lasted. But for the Herrmanns, the problem was still practical and immediate. A bottle could open, a figurine could break, a reporter could be in the house, a detective could ask questions, a stranger could call with a theory. By late February and early March, the family was still inside the same rooms, but now those rooms had visitors, police attention, public opinion, and a name attached to them. And once researchers from Duke walked in, the Seaford house entered a different kind of record. Press coverage brought the Seaford incident to the attention of Duke University's Parapsychology laboratory. J. Gaither Pratt went to the Herrmann house on February 25th. Later, William G. Roll became part of the investigation too. By then, the rooms already had a history. Bottle caps, spilled liquids, moving figurines, police visits, reporters, outside witnesses, and a family trying to keep track of what happened in which room. During Pratt's first visit, 2 incidents reportedly happened within the first half hour. A lamp overturned and a plate of bread fell from a table. They were ordinary objects in ordinary spaces, but they fit the pattern the family had been describing for weeks. Then the activity grew quiet for part of that visit, and Pratt left on March 1st. That quiet, though, didn't hold. After the disturbances reportedly resumed, Pratt returned with William G. Roll for a second visit beginning March 7th. This visit was less publicized. Instead of a house filled mainly with curiosity and press attention, the investigators had a quieter setting to observe. Other outside observers were also part of the case. Physicist Robert E. Zeider visited the home and was reportedly present around incidents involving loud noises in Jimmy's room and a picture later found fallen from the wall. His presence shows how far the case had traveled from James Herrmann's first practical guesses about humidity or chemical pressure. By early March, the questions inside the Herrmann home had drawn police, journalists, parapsychologists, and a physicist. On March 9th, Pratt and Roll reportedly heard 2 loud thumps from Jimmy's room. The final recorded incident came on March 10th. It involved a bleach bottle. After weeks of visitors, theories, police notes, and investigator records, the last noted disturbance returned to the kind of object that had helped start the whole thing, a household bottle. After March 10th, the recorded disturbances stopped. There was no neat closing event, no final experiment that solved it, no confession that ended every argument, no clean piece of footage that made disbelief impossible. The house simply became quiet in the record. For the Herrmann family, that quiet may have been the most welcome thing possible, but the story didn't leave with the last bottle. It stayed attached to Seaford, to the Herrmann name, to Popper, to the police notes, to the reporters, and to the investigators who tried to determine whether the case was a fraud, misunderstanding, physical force, or something that didn't fit comfortably into any of those categories. The Herrmann home became famous because ordinary objects repeatedly appeared to open, move, fall, or break while the people inside tried to prove, first to themselves and then to everyone else, that they weren't simply imagining it. The Seaford incident has more structure around it than many small poltergeist stories. The family is identified. The address is identified. The main disturbance period is specific, running from February 3rd to March 10th, 1958. Police were involved. Detective Joseph Tozzi kept records. Reporters visited the home. J. Gaither Pratt and William G. Roll investigated through Duke University's Parapsychology laboratory, and their report counted 67 disturbances over roughly 5 weeks. That gives the story a real historical frame, but it doesn't prove every claimed movement. The strongest documented pieces are the frame around the case, the Herrmann family, the Seaford house, the February to March 1958 timeline, the police response, the press coverage, and the Duke investigation. Investigators also looked for ordinary causes. Could pressure inside the bottles explain the caps coming off? Could something in the house, the wiring, or outside vibration explain the movement? Those possibilities were checked, but none gave them a clear answer. The reported claims are harder to sort because they're the moving parts of the case itself. The bottles, the figurines, the falling lamps, the furniture, the thumps from nearby rooms. Those all depend on witness accounts, investigator notes, or reconstructions of what people said happened. Some reports are stronger than others. The February 20th ink bottle and figurine sequence has timing, named people, specific room positions, and police follow-up. The Marie Murtha figurine incident involves a named witness and a specific object in a specific room. The reporter and investigator accounts matter too, although some of those involve sounds heard from nearby rooms rather than direct observation of an object moving from start to finish. The weakness is just as clear. The children were in the house. Some sight lines were imperfect. Some incidents happened out of view. Some events were heard or discovered after the fact. Pratt and Roll themselves acknowledged that many incidents could theoretically have been faked, especially when Jimmy or Lucille's exact positions weren't confirmed. On the other side, the case is harder to dismiss because it didn't stay inside the family. Police were called in. Reporters and investigators came through the house. Named witnesses described specific incidents. And in some of the stronger accounts, the children were reportedly away from the objects when something happened. The nickname Popper the Poltergeist belongs in the tradition around the case. It came from the repeated bottle cap incidents, but it shouldn't be treated as proof of a named entity. Later retellings can make Popper sound like a personality haunting the house. The strong source material doesn't require that. The case is strange enough without adding a visible ghost or a motive. So the cleanest reading is also the most honest one. A family reported repeated disturbances. Police and investigators entered the house. Some incidents had named outside witnesses. Ordinary explanations were considered, but not confirmed. And trickery remained possible for many events. And after March 10th, the recorded activity stopped. That's why Seaford still has a hold. It doesn't give you proof. It gives you a record that refuses to flatten into one easy answer. What stays with me about the Seaford incident isn't just the image of bottle caps popping off or figurines breaking across a room. It's the way a normal house slowly stopped feeling private. At first, the Herrmanns were dealing with something inside their own walls, a broken object, a spilled bottle, a noise from another room. Then James Herrmann had to wonder whether his son was the one doing it. Police came, reporters came, researchers came. Strangers started calling and writing with accusations, theories, warnings, and even explanations. By the time people were calling it Popper, the family wasn't only living through events, they were living inside a story other people wanted to define. That's the part I find uncomfortable. Once a case becomes public, the people at the center can get swallowed by the label. The house becomes the haunted house. The child becomes the suspicious child. The family becomes either believable or fraudulent, depending on what somebody already wants to think. And maybe that pressure didn't start when the reporters arrived. In a lot of these cases, researchers look closely at the tension already inside the walls. A 12-year-old boy, the quiet friction of a normal suburban home. There's a theory in parapsychology that a poltergeist isn't a ghost at all, but a projection of bottled-up stress, a physical manifestation of things unsaid. If that's true, the popping bottles weren't an invasion from the outside. They were the sound of a family's internal gravity giving out under the weight of just trying to be normal. And Seaford doesn't let you settle that cleanly. The skeptical answer may be right. Maybe a 12-year-old boy possessed a level of sleight of hand that defied a full-time police detective. But the easy skeptical answer also feels incomplete. Police came to the house, named witnesses, reported things. Investigators took it seriously enough to document it. Some moments seem harder to brush away than others. So the case sits in that uncomfortable middle. Maybe that's why the image of the empty room keeps working on me. It doesn't prove anything by itself, but it captures the whole problem. Someone hears a sound, steps into the room, and finds an object is moved, spilled, fallen, or broken. Everyone nearby says they didn't touch it, and you're left staring at an ordinary space that refuses to give you an answer. This has been State of the Unknown. The Seaford incident is one of those cases where the mystery lives in the space between what people reported and what anyone could finally prove. A bottle can be tested. A room can be searched. Witnesses can be questioned. But once the crash has already happened, the most important part of the moment is gone. All that's left is the object, the room, and people trying to explain why it isn't where it was. If you've been enjoying these stories, leaving a rating or review in your podcast app really does help more people find the show. On Spotify, it's just a tap of the stars. On Apple Podcasts, you can even leave a short written review. I read them and I appreciate everyone. And if you want to make sure you don't miss the next story, just hit follow so it shows up automatically when it drops. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay curious. Because sometimes the thing that unsettles a house isn't what anyone sees. It's what moves when no one is looking.